So we're going to collapse this. We're going to set up Prometheus and Grafana because he is interested in both of them and he kind of wants to kind of make his own dashboards and whatnot. So we're going to do the same thing. And again, the default settings are good enough for what he wants to do. So we're going to copy this for Prometheus. We're going to hit paste again. And yes, we're going to go to the next one, which is Grafana. We're going to copy that. So we're going to let this cook for a bit and install Prometheus. All right, the next one is going to be Grafana. So let's copy Grafana. Hit a paste over here, hit enter. Same thing, we're going to deal with the defaults. Now, you can go to the advanced and it's going to be a guided install, so you can set it up the way you want. But I've tested this Prometheus Grafana. Again, depending on what you're doing, the defaults are enough for a home environment. One thing more is that I want to install for him InfluxDB because that can also work with Prometheus, Grafana, Influx, all these things. So we're going to copy that and we're going to install that next. Let's have a look at our utilization. As you can see here, it's still under 5 gigs. It is growing as we're adding more services. CPU utilization, again, this is being installed. That's why it's spiking. Same with IO delay, but this to me is still very, very, very good. And as you can see, I'm doing all this in real time. It's, not the fastest thing on earth to install, but hey, it's really, really good. It's more than enough. It's not something that you're sitting there twiddling your thumbs getting it done. InfluxDB, we're going to install InfluxDB. Yep, use the default settings. 8 gigs of storage, 2 cores, 2 gigs of RAM. More than enough for a home use again. Again, it's big asterisks at the end. Let's collapse this. Let's collapse that. We've done the monitoring and analytics part. Let's talk about Docker. Now, if you want to use Docker, there's a couple of different options here. So you can set up a Docker LXC, which is my recommendation. You can set up Umbrel. Now, Umbrel is a more of a pre-canned type of Docker OS, so to speak. There's Casa OS. I've done a video on Casa OS. You can set up a Kubernetes, K0s, or you can set up Podman. For him, we're going to stick with Docker. So let's copy this and set up a Docker LXC. When you install InfluxDB, it's going to ask you what version you want to install. For him, we're going to stick with version 1. So this and they're asking also, do you want to install Telegraph? We're going to say yes for that. So let Telegraph install also. And we're done. So we're going to install Docker container. Now for the Docker container, I think that the default settings are a little bit too little, so to speak, right? So in this case, we're going to modify the Docker container script. So we're going to hit yes, and we're going to go to advanced. We're going to select unprivileged, set up the root password. Okay, let's do that for the root password. Container ID 106. Now, don't get confused. It's very simple. It's just going sequential. It starts with 101, 102, 3, 4, 5, 100, sorry, and goes sequentially. The next one in the sequence is 106, so we're going to use that. Host name is going to be Docker. Disk size. Okay, for this disk, I want to give him a little bit more because he might be using Docker a little bit extensively for playing around with Docker. So I'm going to give him 32 gigs. CPU cores, let's give him maximum amount for Docker, 4 cores. Okay, the RAM is something where we need to really up that, so we're going to give him 8192. 8 gigs of RAM I think would be enough for Docker and doing all sorts of Docker stuff. That's okay. The bridge, DHCP, okay, no VLANs. Yes, yes, enable fuse, enable verbose mode. Ready to create it, let's do it. So there we go. So we enabled verbose mode just because we can see what's going on. But as you can see here, it's basically creating the Docker container for you. While it is doing that, let us look at a couple of other things to do here. Now, what I'm going to do also is I'm going to also install Podman because it is compatible, fully compatible with Docker. It's a little bit different. So again, let my friend kind of play around with Podman and see if he likes this or that. Same thing here. If you look at Podman, it's got 2 gigs of RAM, 4 gigs of storage, 2 virtual CPUs. We're going to make it similar in terms of how we set up the actual Docker LXC. So you can see here, this script is actually, running all this. And the beautiful thing is it's going to ask you, do you want to install Portainer? And yes, we do. We definitely want to install Portainer. So there we go. You can see Docker is already installed in a LXC. It's installing Portainer so you can administer Docker. Would you like to add a Docker Compose? Yes, we would. And we're done. Let's give it a clear. And we're going to install Podman also, just so we can play around with both and see which one he likes more. We're going to go to advanced. We're going to hit OK. Let's put a password of something temporary. He can change that later. Container ID is OK. Hostname is OK. We're going to give this also 32 gigs of disk space. We're going to give it 4 CPU cores, 8 gigs of RAM, and the rest are all defaults. And we're not going to enable verbose mode on this. And we're going to hit install. So there we go. So it's installing it with the specifications that I have set. Now, as you can see, RAM utilization is rising. I think honestly, the more you add to your Proxmox server, I really think that the RAM is probably going to be the first thing you encounter as far as a bottleneck is concerned. But provided your machine can do 32 gigs or more, I think that's something you can always upgrade down the line. Let's go back to the scripts. You know what? Let's install Kubernetes also. Why not? We can do it, so let's just do it. Let him play around with everything. So we're going to hit paste, hit enter. And for this, we're just going to use the default settings. So let it just go ahead and use default. He's not that big into Kubernetes. He just wants to play around with Docker, Podman, stuff like that. So, but we're just going to give him that as an option. So we're done with Kubernetes over here. Operating system, again, these are LXCs. You can always do it through, Proxmox itself. So we're not going to do that. Then we have Nginx Proxy Manager, because a lot of these services, he's going to be exposing it to the internet, and you do need a proxy manager there. So Nginx Proxy Manager is the go-to tool. We want to install the Helm Package Manager, so we're going to do that. And we're done. Let's install now Nginx Proxy Manager. And we're going to use the defaults. Again, you can change the specs if you want, but the defaults for a proxy manager is more than enough. Let's go back here. See what else is there. Okay, yeah, WireGuard for VPNing. He will need that because if he wants to remotely administer his Proxmox server, so WireGuard VPN is the way to go. Now, you can use other VPN. So, for example, Tailscale. Again, very nice product. But we're going to use WireGuard. So again, copy this. Let's have a look here at our server and see how it's performing. Again, as you can see here, we have 10 virtualized instances, right? Like we have a full fat VM and then 9 other containers. As you can see here, that it's barely breaking a sweat. It's working really well. And once the install is done, what I will do is I will go through a couple of these containers and kind of show you the speed of them and the responsiveness of them, and you'll be quite surprised. It is very, very responsive. So again, as you can see, it's happening in real time. It's not really that slow. It's working quite well. So I've decided that I'm going to install from WiredGuard as well as Tailscale. So and then he can pick whichever one he wants to stick with. Awesome. So this Nginx proxy manager did take a little bit of time, but again, nothing super long. Let's get WireGuard installed. So copy this. We're going to paste it into here. Hit enter. We're going to use the default settings for WireGuard. And as we said, we're also going to install Tailscale for my friend. So we're going to copy that. And as you can see that because this is one core that's allocated, it's roughly around 25%, which means that that core is being fully utilized at this present moment while the setup and install is happening. So that's why it's a little bit on the slower side. You could change this to 2 cores or more, but honestly, it's kind of pointless. Okay, so we're done with WireGuard. Let's install Tailscale also. So as you can see here, when you want to install Tailscale, it tells you here that to install Tailscale on an existing LXC, run the command below in the Proxmox shell, replace 106 with your LXC ID, right? So basically, let me give you a hypothetical scenario. If you wanted to access Nginx Proxy Manager, the container, remotely via Tailscale, you would basically set it up on that specific proxy manager. That I think I'll let him do it. I'll speak to him and I'll kind of explain him how to do it. But let's let him do that because I don't know what containers he wants this to be enabled on. Now we get to the media part, and this is where the need for a more powerful server really comes in. All of these Plex, MB, Jellyfin, these are all media servers that use a lot of hard drive space, and because of the video and the encoding and decoding, they will use a GPU. If there is one. If there isn't one, it will max out your CPU cores doing the encoding and decoding. So again, for setting up Plex, MB, Jellyfin on Proxmox, in that case, yes, I would say then having a desktop class machine, whether you design one by yourself or not, slightly more beefier CPU with a GPU inside there, or if you have an Intel, you can use the integrated GPU. I think it will be good for media servers. So what we're doing right now is not really media servers, although you kind of could do it also. Again, really depends. He's a big photo user, and Photo Prism is an awesome photo collecting tool. We're going to hit copy on that, but we're going to modify this one. Simply because we're going to give them a little bit more space than what this gives you. So we're going to hit yes, and we're going to go to advanced, hit OK. Let's give it a default password. Container ID is OK. This is OK. Now, he did tell me that he has about 10 to 15 gigs of photos that he wants backed up. and he says that he keeps on adding to it, so we're going to give him 32 gigs. Why not? And for PhotoPrism, because it uses a lot of AI, CPU power, we're going to give it all 4 cores, so that just speeds up a lot of stuff for him. RAM also, I think 4 gigs is enough, so we're going to leave it at 4. Rest should be all defaults. Sure, let's enable root access and no, and install. So as you can see here, we have 12 things virtualized, yet the CPU is, to me at least, it's not really breaking that much of a sweat. And granted, these are all like idle sitting there, but that just kind of gives you an example of the power. We had a seg fault. Let's see. Let's try it again. Maybe it didn't resolve a host name. Awesome. Now, because this one failed, it's created a 111 and this is 112, so it's the same thing. We're going to delete one of these. So let's just give this some time to finish. In fact, we don't even really have to. We can just shut down this container here. And we're going to hit more, remove, and remove it because it's done. Okay, so this is installing in the background. This should be done by now. So PhotoPrism is done. We're also going to install Navidrome. He is a music user, so we're going to copy that and paste it again in here. The default settings for Navidrome is only 4 gigabytes of storage. He did tell me that he has about 10 odd gigs of music that he has. So we're gonna go to advanced, set this. Yeah, sure. We'll set it to 111 Navidrome. We're gonna give him 16 gigs of storage on this one. 2 CPU cores for a media MP3 server, music server is more than enough. RAM, I think also 1 gig is more than enough. It's only going to be him for the most part, maybe his significant other. And we're going to hit basically these settings. So we're going to let this do its thing here. And of course, he is going to use an ad blocker. He definitely wants that because it's just so much better. I'm going to install both for him. I'm going to install Pi-hole as well as AdGuard. Let him choose whichever one he likes. I personally have a softer spot for AdGuard, but Pi-hole is also equally as good. So we're going to install Pi-hole first. We got a segmentation fault. Okay, let's try it again. Huh. Let's try something. Let's get rid of this. More, remove. Okay, there we go. Uh, let's install Pi-hole first. We're going to get to Navidrome in a bit. This was probably giving some issues. Sure, the default settings for Pi-hole are good, honestly. I mean, Pi-hole really doesn't use that much resources. 2 gigs of storage, 1 core, and 512 gigs of RAM is more than enough. Now, it is complaining about a couple of things. Let's just, because we've been installing a lot of stuff, let's just give it a quick reboot, okay? See what happens. You can see here the containers and VM should be shutting off very, very soon now. And even Home Assistant is done. So we're going to give this a little bit. The machine should reboot fairly quickly. And I want you to look at the CPU utilization during boot up, right? Because honestly, that is when all these 12, 13 VMs and containers are starting up. There's a lot of activity going on. That kind of will give you a good idea of what it's going to do to this CPU, right? So let's just hit F5, just reboot it. I want to cache this right at the beginning as soon as it boots. There we go. Okay, so Proxmox is booting up. It's going to start booting up all the containers. There we go. So you can see it does spike, right? It definitely does spike. But even despite that, look, it's still pretty quick. Not going to lie. There we go. Should install or should start these up fairly quickly now. And we're up and running. That's it. Okay, what were we doing? We were doing Pi-hole. So let's copy this. Let's install Pi-hole. We're going to use the default settings again. There we go. And the next thing we're going to do is also install AdGuard Home. So we're going to copy this also. It's going to wait until this is done. And Pi-hole is up and running. Very quickly, we're going to do AdGuard now. Again, default settings for AdGuard is more than enough. And let's have a quick look at what else we can install for him. Get rid of this.